Jeffrey Garfield Watts notes, Ellison was at the forefront of emphatically denying any significant Afro American cultural connection with Africa and almost fanatical in proclaiming a lack of personal interest in Africa and Africans. Equally conspicuous is Ellison's omission of the cultural connection between West Indians and indigenous Black Americans. Continuing, continuing, Watts proposes perhaps Edison thought that an identification with Africa would be self stigmatizing. Such internalized racist thoughts concerning Africa were frequently held by black intellectuals of his generation. Quote, the world's getting busier all the time. As Joe Williams and Count Basie well know, close quote. Edison observed in a 1957 letter to his friend and colleague Albert Murray, open quote, and even though those Africans have Ghana, they still haven't deployed, they still haven't developed to the point where the blues start, close quote. At another point in the same exchange, he asks, open quote, who the hell dreamed up Louis Armstrong, close quote. Reflecting his commitment to the view that American Negroes should not identify with a diaspora, and his condensation, con- condescension, and his condescension toward blacks. Elsewhere, he replied, quote, he's a mask for a lyric poet who is much greater than most now writing. That a mask to study. Only I know enough not to miss my train by messing around looking over in Africa or even down in the West Indies for an explanation. Close quote. Almost 2 decades later, he would state with emphasis, open quote, I've never identified with Africa. Next section. Fellows traveling, open quote. I got a telephone call from the late Era Bell Thompson, managing editor of Ebony, journalist Carl Rowan recalls, open quote. Mr. Johnson, publisher Johnson H., says Paul Robeson is getting a raw deal in the media and every place else. Nobody will tell his side of the story. What was that coughing? He says you're the only journalist in America who can write the truth and not get destroyed by the the McCarthyites, who will consider it. Close quote. Rowan agreed, and the article did indeed feature a rather extensive and, given the existing broader climate, balanced assessment of Robeson's claim against the federal government regarding the withholding of his passport and his complaints regarding the actions of black leadership. in the feature published in October 1957, 7 months after Ghana's independence, Robinson situated the African American struggle in an international and diasporic context. In response to a question from Rowan about the possibility of working within the boundaries of United States, he stated, quote, I think the Negro should solve his problems within the American framework, and he is definitely on the way to dignity and equality, but he never will achieve integration until the time comes when all Negroes show complete solidarity, backed by all colored people of the world. With regard to the civil rights leadership's role in his marginalization, Robinson argued, quote, State Department could not have done this had Negro leaders spoken out. Instead, Walter White, Jackie Robinson, and other Negroes blasted me without even talking to me to find out what I had really said and why I had said it. Close quote. Robinson also contended that the responses generated within the African American community reflected a class divide, and that is infiliation had, had long been with the working class. Quote, I came to my present viewpoint between 1928 and 1940, and not in Russia but in London, he told Ron. Open quote again. I first went to Russia in 1943, not as a politician, but as an artist. It was the British labor struggle that shaped my political philosophy. That is why, in this country, my identification is with the Negro working class. not with black bourgeoisie. On this same point, W. E. Du Bois suggested that, somewhat to his surprise, very little support was forthcoming from Robinson himself. And the other targets of the McCarthy era from the black middle classes. And specifically, the quote talented tenth that he had previously identified as the quote future of the race, end quote. He did concede that a quote dichotomy in the Negro group, the development of class structure, was to be expected, end quote. And that the size of these gaps would increase, quote, as discrimination against Negroes as such decreases. Nevertheless, he was still struck by the unwillingness of middle class blacks to resist government's efforts at censorship. Quote, the reaction of Negroes, he wrote, end quote, open quote again, revealed a distinct cleavage not hitherto clear in American Negro opinion, end quote. Somewhat in the spirit of comments, E. Franklin Fraser would later make the later make in Black Bourgeoisie, and Du Bois added, Negroes of intelligence and prosperity had become American in their acceptance of exploitation as defensible and in their imitation of America, called conspicuous expenditure. They proposed to make money and spend it as it pleased them. They hated communism, and socialism as much as any white American. Their reaction toward Paul Robeson is typical. They simply could not understand his surrendering $1,000 a night for a moral conviction. End quote. Within African American communities, Robinson clearly drew more support from working class blacks and particularly union members than from the colored middle classes. The former, who that Sam? The former phenomenon can be partly explained by Robison's contributions to the National Negro Labour Council, NLC, which was established in 1951 and affiliated with the UAW and CIO, and his strong identification with the labor movement as a whole. The class skew with regard to support for Robinson also reflected the different political orientations of black working classes and the black middle classes. In many respects, the Robinson anti communist debate was a proxy for a more explicit and direct class debate among blacks. That's the proper salience of issues related to economic justice and the direction the civil rights movement should take. The NAACP's reluctance to get involved in the Scottsboro Boys case in 1931, in contrast with the CPUSA's involvement, symbolized this class divide in the ways diverging notions of respectability bifurcated the black polity. The year after the Ebony interview saw the publication of Robison's Here I Stand, which suggested a certain de emphasis on the part of his Soviet affiliations. This turn might be read largely as a response to Khrushchev's revelations regarding Stalin's regime at the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in February 1956. And one can imagine that by this point, Robinson had become frustrated with some aspects of Comintern policy, even if he was unwilling to express these reservations publicly. This shift, though, was just was likely just as connected to Robinson's desire to re-establish his authenticity and credentials with African American audiences. His effort in geographically locate himself within the larger black community is evident in the first paragraph of his book's foreword. Quote, I am a Negro The house I live in is in Harlem, the city within a city. Negro, metropolis of America. And now, as I write of things that are urgent in my mind and heart, I feel the press of all that is around me here where I live, at home among my people. End quote.
Hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome off. Yeah, yeah. Ha- Uh, let me call you tomorrow. Hmm. Let me remember now. What you bringing? What you got? What you having? The olive oil, cooking oil. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. Hmm. We show you tomorrow. Yeah, man. You come down tomorrow? No problem. Yeah, yeah. All right. We show you. Yeah, yeah, Audrey. Hi, Audrey. How are you? Oh, not too bad. You got the flu coming on me. Hmm. Thank you. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. What's our way? You know? All right. All right. What me show you tomorrow? Let's Paul. Let's have a Paul. Paul, tomorrow. You gotta check it and give it to me. Go on.
Hang up. Should I hang up?
Eh, eh. Paul, himself. Bottom of the rice. Spread the corn.
Oh, well, life, no matter talk your business. With his references to his brother and father as ministers, that he repeated a refrain, I've got a home in that rock, end quote. He also identified himself with the black church, the religious foundations, and black social and political life. Although he did not shy away from his commitment to, quote, scientific socialism and the significance of the Soviet model, the dominant theme was his devotion to and involvement in the black liberation struggle, albeit defined more broadly than most civil rights leaders suggested in this period. Accordingly, he cited the relevance of the anti-colonial movement, his encounters with Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, Azikiwe in London, the Bandung Conference, and the importance of African Americans' right and willingness to travel, so they might generate broader coalitions for the improvement of the circumstances of blacks throughout the diaspora. To sustain this last claim, and his implicit rejection of the particular version of the family metaphor Walter White and others endorsed.
I made a point.
Read it over. To sustain his last claim and his implicit rejection of the particular version of his family metaphor Walter White, Walter White and others endorsed. Robison situated his efforts in a traditional extending in a tradition extending back Frederick Douglass's transatlantic abolitionist work. Quote, to the Negro artists as well as the Negro spokesman, the moral support of England and Europe has been of great importance, and indeed, the right to travel has been a virtual necessity for the Negro artists. Close quote. Robinson, in many respects, quite rightly, also emphasized the racial character of his predicament, observing, quote, the controversy concerning my views and actions had its origin not among the Negro people, but among the white folk on top who have directed me, who have directed at me the thunderbolts of their displeasure and rage. Close quote. Against this backdrop, he highlighted the role race played with regard to the deprivation of his passport privilege and cited a State Department brief asserting that if he quote, that if the passport was cancelled solely by the applicants recognized status as spokesman for a large section of Negro Americans. We submit that this would not amount to an abuse of discretion in view of appellant frank admission that he has been for years extremely active politically, sorry, in behalf of independence of the colonial people of Africa. Close quote. The passport restrictions and domestic sanctions by this point had made it nearly impossible for Robison's career to proceed. His income dropped from over 100,000 in 1947 to less than 2% of that figure in 1950. And his marginalization within black leadership circles was virtually complete by the time the book was published. Later that year, however, after the Kent et al. Versus Dulles decision in 1958, which made the deprivation of passport privilege of suspected communists unconstitutional on First Amendment grounds. Robinson and DeBoer, among others, had their passport restored. Both immediately left the country. DeBoer at age 90 departed in August to Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, China, United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Virgin Islands, and Nigeria. 3 years later, on October 1, 1961, he would apply to join the CPUSA and embark for Ghana, where he would die 2 years later at age 95 on August 27th, 1963, the eve of March on Washington. I think I could do my sir. Near 40 minutes. No more. Even I say discuss. We're gonna discuss something. Even go Africa. Marcus Garvey never go Africa, and Marcus couldn't agree. And then no, the boy.
Oh, the boy.
And then
Really, the king of the black people.
hmm?
Really, the king of the black people. And when said, "Oh, they want to like rule the black people." And all the whole I know. My mama, Eman, Gavin, and that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But this was really looking very lightly. I don't know that Paul Robinson suffered so much discourtesy and behalf of American woman.
Who's Paul Robertson?
The one there we got.
No, but what, we don't know him as a public figure.
I think Paul Robinson was a pianist.
Okay.
And the world's greatest musician. They took away his passport. And when they took away his passport, but I know what Iton is saying. They have taken away his passport in his career. And he's already got 100,000 a year. And most of them to about 2,000. Why the American can't even have that? I don't know. One thing I know about the book. As you say now, the black movement around the United States and Europe. When that Paul Robeson was discriminated against because he went to Europe. And then he wrote this article to the Ebony. And they accused him of coming in a comment. The same thing happened to the boy.
Yeah.
And some other black musicians, the same thing happened to them. And the same thing happened to Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
You know, that's Garvey with everybody, make Garvey back. I don't know for some reason Garvey must seek to go to Africa. He went back to England after I come from prison. Very intriguing book, very intriguing charts. What you were saying now?
Mm-hmm. No.
Very, very intriguing. And I think that showed up because white artists, black artists in America couldn't earn the money in America. They have to go to Europe to earn it. And the establishment in America in order to fight them, deny them right to travel. And was not until they get the case they call Dulles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The case decided, the Supreme Court decided, then you can't take away the man's passport, you can't take away the passport. The passport is the right
Second
man.
amendment.
The First Amendment right.
Oh, first. First or second?
Yeah?
First or second?
Second or first.
Okay.
But it's like it is very, very lightning. Very lightning. Yeah, I like to know you want to read on this world on to. I don't want to Paul Robinson. I know he died really. I don't know if he died in America or in Europe.
No, man, no. We continue tomorrow, man. I need some
But
food.
that cousin, the parallel to be drawn is Clark McKay. Clark McKay went to Europe too.
Yeah,
They went to Russia.
yeah,
I was greeted by the Russians.
yeah,
They want to convert him into
yeah.
a communist, but he refused. Went back to America. But it don't seem to me that Paul, that Clark McKay living a big life after he went back to America.
Yeah.
And, very interesting. We are in tomorrow. Thank you, sometime.
All right, boss. Guys, peace out. Ciao.
Right?
O'Neil, O'Neil, Drisdale. Hello, hello, O'Neil. Big up. What literature is he pursuing? What literature?
Oh,
I have loved your videos. Thank you.
oh,
Thank you. Thank you. Big up. Respect. Love you guys. Bye.
oh, you know, this,